Hello friends, Jermaine here and welcome to this video. We are resuming our restaurant search app series, and in this episode we are going to be building out our search filter screen. This is what it looks like currently. There are 5 filters we're going to be setting. So one of them is categories. We've got this list of categories from the Zomato API, and we are able to select the categories we want to be included. The second filter we can specify is the location type, which gives us all these options. We can order our results by ascending or descending. We can sort our restaurants either by cost or rating. And then the 5th filter is the amount of results to show. Maximum is 20, but we can reduce the count. So once we filtered our search, we can come back to the main screen and let's enter our search in here. So that will go to the API and send our filters across as well. So it's come back, for instance, with a list of 5 results as we selected in that slider. So without further ado, let's get into it. Currently, the search filter screen looks like that. It's a stateful widget. And then in the build function, we've got a simple scaffold with text in the body. I'll get rid of this background color. I'll go ahead and wrap this text widget in a container. And we're going to have our widgets in a list view just to enable scrolling. So let's go ahead and build our category section. We'll add some styling. And for this style, we'll just set the font size and we'll make the font bold. Okay, then let's have some padding around this text. I'm going to refactor and then I'll wrap this text with a padding widget. And then we'll make the padding symmetric. We'll set horizontally to 15 to add a bit of padding on the sides. Next, we're going to be displaying each of our categories. Let's wrap this text within a column. So following our categories text widget will be a wrap widget. And this takes in a list of children. We'll generate a list of widgets. And let's say we want 10 widgets. The generate method takes in a function as the second argument, which gives us the current index within the list generation sequence. Just going to return a filter chip. The label will just be a text widget. Okay, so we've got something like that. You can also specify a label style. We'll give it a weight and we'll set the font weight to bold. Let's retrieve the default color from the theme. So in order to do that, we can do theme.of and we'll pass in our current build context, which is from here. And then we want the default text theme. We want body text 1 and then we want color. And that should give us that. You can set the checked state of each of these filter chips. So for now, let's just say indexes that are even and set a color for the selected state. So I use the red accent. Let's set the check mark color as white. And to get the color of the selected check mark to be white, we need to have some conditional logic around here. I'll cut this one and in here I'll create a final variable and I'll paste that as the value so we can have that here. And in here I'll just do a check that if it's selected, then we'll set the colors to white, or else we use the default theme color. And we need to set the onSelected function, which gives us a boolean containing the selected state. Next, we need to shift all of that to the left. That brings us to the column. We need to set the cross-axis alignment to start. Also, this wrap widget allows us to specify the spacing between each of the children. We can set that to 10 to add some spacing between, so like that. All right, so this looks good so far. Let's add some spacing at the top there by rendering a sized box. We are now at a good place to load in the actual categories from the Zomato API. So if I pull the API docs over, we need to make a GET request to /categories. Making the request gives us this response, which based on the schema, we have the ID here and we have the name. Now, the reason why we are not going to hard code any of these is because if any of these categories change, then our app could potentially break, especially where the IDs are concerned. I will create a method, and in here we're going to be making our API call. Before we do that, we need a reference to our DO client, and I believe we defined it in search page over here. So currently in the options, the base URL is tied to the search. For now, I'll just cut this out of here and then I'll paste it here at the top. We are going to clean this up later on. Let's remove this search bit from the base URL so we can use it for both the search page as well as the search filters page. And let's fix our search page state over here. So we can just do do.get our type search, and let's come down here and then we'll make our API call and we'll make it to the categories endpoint, and then we'll retrieve our data from our response. We want the categories key, which will give us the list of categories from our categories JSON. So this bit. And what we want to do here is, instead of using the categories JSON structure as is, we're going to create a data class which will consume our JSON object. So it makes it easier to use in our application. So I'll just collapse this out, and then over here, I'll create a class called category. This will consume the ID and then the name. And then I'll create a const constructor which will pass in the ID and then the name from our JSON response. We can come back to this, and then we are going to return the data, and then we'll map over that. And we just want to return a category object which takes in the ID from our JSON structure and then the name, which means that this feature will give us a list of category types. So in order to use this, let's create a state property called categories. Let's override the init state lifecycle method, and in here we'll make our call to retrieve our categories. And then once we've got our categories, we'll just invoke set state and then we'll assign it to categories. So once we've made this assignment, we can come down to our build function, and then we'll go down to where we've got our wrap widget. We want to go ahead and generate based on the length of categories. And then in here, we need to retrieve the category. We'll look in our categories and then we'll pass in the index that we got here. And then the text over here will be based on the category's name. And let's save this. All right, so we got an error because categories is null. So let's have this widget only when our categories list has been set. So we can have a conditional here, and I'll say if categories is a list of category, then we'll go ahead and render the wrap widget, or else we'll render a center widget and we'll have a circular progress indicator. So that looks like that. And once it retrieves the list of categories, it will show that. So for now, we'll just show this because the init state function runs only once, but let's add a bit of padding around this to test this actually works. Let's go back and then we'll open this again. Okay, so we are getting an error. I think I need to add a / over here. Let me stop the app and then I'll run this again. So let's come here. Right, so there we go. I was missing the /. So we got our map of results. Okay. I'll disable the breakpoint and continue. And then we've got another error. We need to convert it to a list. So let's try this again. I'll go back and then I'll visit the route again. And now we get this. Okay, so that looks good. Next, we need to handle the selected state of these filter chips. I will create another state property over here. This will be a list of integers and we'll call it selected categories. We'll initialize it with an empty list. And then for is selected, we are going to get rid of this bit and we'll check that our selected categories contains the specific categories ID. So everything else should remain the same except this section here. So in our onSelected function, when we click on any of those filter chips, we need to update our state and specifically our selected categories list. We'll do that by checking the selection state. So if the filter chip is selected, then selected should be set to true. And if it's set to true, then we want to add the selected categories ID to our list of selected categories, or else we want to remove the category ID from our list of categories. So let's see what it looks like when we test this out. So if I click one, it goes ahead and it's added to our list of categories, which is here. And then when we click it again, it's removed from our list. So we can go ahead and of course click multiple ones, which means that our selected categories contain a list of category IDs, which means that we are able to pass those selected category IDs to our API in order to tailor our search results. Before we add the other filters, it will be much more easier if we create a specialized object which will contain each of our filters. So rather than passing each of our filters as individual variables, we'll just pass that single object across. I will come down over here and I'll create a class called SearchOptions. For now, let's have our list of categories in here. Then I'll create a constructor and leave it as such. So if we come over here now to our search filter state, we can create an instance of our SearchOptions object. You can do without this one because we'll be setting the categories we defined for this object. So in our build function, we can come over here and correct it. So we called it SearchOptions.categories, and I'll copy that and I'll paste it for these two. And I think we need to fix it somewhere else as well. We need to initialize our search options. So we'll invoke setState and we'll initiate that as such. Let's hot restart and let me check again. Okay, so now we got that. Okay, looks like we're able to even do without setState. So let's do this instead and let's check it still works. Okay, still works. I'll get rid of this bit as well. All right, so let's move on to the next filter we're going to be adding. Let's add some spacing by using a sized box. I'll render another text widget for our location. I'll give it a style, and the style is pretty much the same as the categories label. For each of the location, we are going to have that in a drop down. We'll set it to string. This string takes in a list of items. So looking at the API for search, the location type are these options. Easiest way is to set this in a list, and I will do that over here. So let's scroll up to our stateful widget, and I'm setting it here because we're not going to be changing the details. So this is it for our list of locations. There's also options for sort and options for the order. So I'll save that and let's come back down over here. For our items, we'll do widget and then we'll access the locations list that we created, and then we'll map over those. We'll return a drop-down menu item. The child will be a text widget which holds in the string as a value, and let's convert this to a list. And we also need to set the value of this drop-down menu item to value, and let's set this unchanged argument, which is a function giving us the value. All right, so if we click this, we get these options. Of course, when I select a value, nothing happens because we need to update our state. Also, let's make this drop-down button expanded. I'll set its expanded option to true. And before we set the value, I will come down to the search options class. Let's add the option for our location, and then we are able to set it by doing that. So we can have the value of this set to our search options.location. When we change this drop-down button field, we can set our updated location. All right, so let's test this out. If I come here and I select an option, we get that and that. What happens if we visit the screen again? Okay, so let's have a default selection, and we can do that by coming to our init state, and in here we'll set the location to the first item in our list of locations, which will be city. So if I visit this again, then we get city selected by default. Okay, so that's it for our city. We can go ahead and set our other filters. So I'll add another sized box, and then I'll copy this piece of text. I'll place it here, And then this is our order by. And then for each of our options, which is either ascending or descending, we'll render a radial list tile. So let's render out the first option in our order list. And then I'll set this unchanged function. So it looks like that. We'll set the title. All right. So because we got two options, we can either render this twice or we can use a loop for this. So I'll have a for loop in here and we'll have our initializer idx for index equals 0 and index is less than widgets the order.length, and then we'll do idx++, and then let's just change these 2 bits to have our index variable, and that gives us these 2 options. And then on selection, we need to update the actual value because right now when we select it, nothing happens. So we'll come down to our search options and then we'll define our order. And let's set that here. And in fact, let's go and do the same for our sort as well. Okay, so if we come back here on selection, we want to update our state and then we do search options dot order and we'll set it to our selection. And then our group value will be set to that. So let's go ahead and select an option. Okay, so now it's selected and that's now selected. And let's come to our init state so we can initialize it with a value. So sort will be widget.sort.first. So that. Let's carry on. Next, we're gonna look at the sort section. So I'll add some spacing. I'll copy this. In fact, let's just do sort by, and then I'll create a wrap. And then for the children, we'll get our sort from the widget. We'll map over that. And then we want to return a choice chip. This takes in a label and we'll set an unselected, which has the selected value. We will set the selected option, which will be based on our sort equals sort. And let's convert this map to a list. And in order to toggle the right sort option, we'll do this. If selected, we'll update our state where the sort value of our current search options is set to the sort that was selected. So if I go ahead and click on that, that's now highlighted because of this condition here. And if I click on that, that's now highlighted. Let's add some spacing for our wrap widget. And then lastly, we will show our slider. So I'll copy this again. I'll paste this here. And then over here, I'll change the text to number of results to show. And then afterwards, we'll define a slider widget. The value takes in a double. For now, we'll set it to 10. And let's set our unchanged function. Gives us the current value. So let's specify a minimum and maximum. Okay, so that gives us that. So right now when I move it, nothing happens because we need to define this unchanged function. So let's come down to our search options. And then for our count, we'll have a double. Let's add it here as a parameter. I'll come up here to our search filter state. And in fact, I'll define a count. I'll set it to 20 because the Zomato API returns a maximum of 20 results. In our init state, let's define our count. All right, because it's evaluating to an int, let's just make it a double. The value of the slider will be based on the count. And because count gets set after the init state method runs, we can just give it a default value. And in order to get the sliding working, let's update our state. And we'll say search options.count equal to, then we'll pass the value. Okay, so if I come over here, it should now be able to slide as such. All right, we need to set a label based on the count value and convert that to a string. Let's change this max value to our count. And let's go ahead and set the amount of divisions we need to 3. So yeah, now it looks like that. Okay, we needed to set the divisions option. The label is set to a double, so 10.0 rather than just 10. We can round it. So if I come back here, it should, yeah, now look like that. Let's make sure that one of these is selected by default. So in our search options, I'll set the order. So if I exit and I come back here, Now this is selected by default. Okay, so we pretty much got our screen built. We've got the categories selection working. We can set a location, we can set our order, our rating, and then the list of results to show. The next challenge is to figure out how we can send these options across to this screen here so that it will affect the search results. So when we do that, we will essentially be passing it in here when we run our search restaurants function. One of the ways of doing it is an approach that is called lifting up state. I'm going to demonstrate this, but I wouldn't recommend it as an approach to use, especially in a complex application. So here's basically what lifting up state would look like. In our search filters, whenever we adjust our options, we will invoke a function which will update another state property in this search page. So what that looks like is I'll create a search options property here. Let's call it filters. If we come back to our search filters state for widget, we will define a function which takes our filters search options object as a parameter, and then we'll call it onset filters. And then we'll define a constructor with a named parameter on search filters as such. So what this means is we are able to come over here and then we will have our onset filters here, which will give us the filters that we'll send across. And then we'll just update our filters state property as such. So in this scenario, we are lifting up the state of search filters, specifically the search options, to a parent widget, which is our search page state. So like I said, this is just a demonstration of what lifting up state would look like. You wouldn't want to do this in an actual production application because now you got this widget that is tightly coupled to this parent. So this is just a demo of what that would look like. So if we did something like this, then that means in here, before we make our API call, we can have our filter results in here. Let's say for our count, we can say filters.count, so something like that. And then we'll come back to our search filters. And then let's say in here for our slider, whenever we update our state, we can do widget.onset filters, and then we can pass our search options through. So what is happening is in our filter screen, so over here, we want 5 results to show. So if we come over here and then we type in a search term and we hit search, and we see the results are exactly 5 because we've lifted up the state of our filters, and then we're using that to affect our query. So that's the gist of what lifting up state is. We are going to be getting rid of this approach and introducing one of the state management solutions that are out there. So we'll do that in the next video. But for now, let's just amend this slightly. Rather than extracting each property for each of our options, we can come to our search options and then I'll define a toJSON method, and this will export all of our fields like so. And for our categories, we want to join that with a comma because the API expects a string of integers that are separated with the comma, which means we can come back up here to our search page state, and rather than doing that, we can use the spread operator. So do that, and then I'll have an expression, and here we'll check if our filters is not equal to null. That means it's been initialized with a value. We will invoke the toJSON method, or else we'll just pass in an empty map object. So what this spread does is it takes the key and value pairs in one map object, and then it will spread it in this map object. So let's test this out. Again, I'll come over here and let's make our count 10 items. I'll come back, and then when I hit that, it gives us exactly 10 items. So we got 3, 6, 9, 10. All right. And now when we come back here, we see that the slider does not remember what we selected. It goes back to 20, which is one of the problems you get into when we are lifting up state, because we are sending the updated value upwards. But then whenever we initialize search filters, a new object it gets created, so it does not remember the previous selection. So you'd be tempted to essentially send the filters back down into this widget in order to get the update, but we're not going to be doing that. Last thing I want to do is to move these widgets into various files just to prepare us for the next set of videos that are going to be coming up. Let's do this quickly. If I collapse all of this, let's start by moving the search filters page. Under lib, I'll create a source folder, src, and in here I'll create search filters screen dot, and in main function I'll copy all of that. Then I'll paste that in here. Let's import Flutter material. And then the only thing we need to fix is this deal dependency. So let's define a deal client here for now. And I'll import the deal package and we'll set it here, which means over here we'll do widget.deal. I'll save this and let's go ahead and pass that in. Let's move our search page. I'll create a new file I'll call it search screen. And then let's copy these two in here. And let's import Flutter. And let's fix this import for now. I'll just import search filter screen and we'll create a deal instance variable. Then we can pass that in here. Let's also import deal. And then we'll do widget.deal. Over here we'll do widget.deal. Let's go ahead and fix this one. So I'll copy this bit. I'll create a search form.dart file. I'll place that in here. We'll import Flutter again, and that should fix our errors. Let's come back to our search screen and we'll import search form. Lastly, let's fix this bit. Okay, I'll create a new file for restaurant item. Then I'll copy this bit and we'll paste both of these in here. So that's the restaurant item stateless widget, and then the wrapper class for each of the JSON results. We'll import Flutter, and then we'll import the rating bar package. Okay, let's create another file for our restaurant search app, and that will take in this bit. We'll also make sure we import Flutter, and then let's import the search screen .dart. And then let's pull that in here. Okay, so lastly, let's put this deal object in another file, and I'll call that client.dart, and let's move this import in here. And we also need to import the .env package. Okay, and for search screen, we need to import these. So I'll import restaurant item. Okay, and I think next we need to sort out our deal import. So in our restaurant search app, for our search page, we'll pass in deal here like that, and then let's import our client. So that should be good now. So let's stop and start again. Let's check that everything still works. Okay, everything seems fine. We're still able to select our options as well. You can sort by cost and rating, and that slider works as well. So let's do that. I've set it to 5, and if we search, when we search, we get that. Okay, so our project is now in the right place to introduce the various state management solutions that are out there. So this will be handled in upcoming videos. And on that note, I'm gonna end here. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button and also share this video. If you are not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you don't miss out on future updates. If you've got any questions, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.